Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. We're chugging right along in October. This month, we are honoring our breast cancer survivors and those we have lost to breast cancer, as well as our Domestic Violence Awareness and Prevention Month focus. And so this month, we are looking at viewers' choice. So survivors have given me some topics that they wanted discussed. So first week, we discussed being able to receive compliments. The second week, we discussed healing from things and people that make us feel broken. Last week, we discussed coping after a loved one dies from cancer. And this week, we will be discussing domestic violence, also known as intimate partner violence. And we'll discuss that this week as well as next week. So I know social media makes it very difficult for us sometimes to really understand what is a domestic violence or being in a intimate partner violence relationship, what that actually means, because we throw around the word toxic so much. And I think sometimes it gets really overused to a point that we often normalize that as a descriptor for relationships. So I really want to be clear in the podcast today about what constitutes intimate partner violence or domestic violence. So let's start off by talking about what kinds of behaviors that might look like. So there are a lot of different types of ways that people can be abused in relationships. Financial is one that I think a lot of times people don't think as often about, but that can include things like withholding resources. People might take your paycheck and they'll say, well, okay, I'll manage money better than you manage money, or I'll manage the credit card payments, or I'll take care of the expenses, you just give me your check. And then they don't actually allow the other person to be able to have access to banking information or other financial information, may not be access to the retirement information. The person may not even be on the lease, or they may not be on the mortgage, or they may not be on that car payment, because that is a way to keep a person in control because they don't have the ability to be able to acquire, use, or maintain any kind of economic resources. And so, what we don't want when we're trying to abuse people financially is for them to be able to make or use any of their money. So, we want to kind of hold them hostage, if you will. And that could be even limiting employment. Sometimes people will say, okay, well, you don't have to work, I'll work, I'll take care of everything. But what that essentially does is that keeps a person dependent financially on the person who may be abusing them in the relationship. Now, I don't want that to be confused with if you and your partner decide you're going to stay at home, you may be raising the children, or maybe you've got some health issues and you're able to stay home, or maybe they are the provider for the family and that gives you an opportunity to do some volunteer work or some of the other things, or you might be getting something off the ground. I don't want those to be confused as the same thing, because in those instances, that is a conversation. Two people agree, you have goals you're working toward, you still have access to everything. So that is very different. But when you don't have access and a person will tell you that you don't need to have access. You don't trust me. Why do you want to have access to this information? All of the money is our money, so I'm managing it. I'm taking care of it, right? And so, and sometimes even just belittling a person's ability to be able to even understand. You don't even know how to take care of this. You don't know how to do it, so just get out of the way, right? Those can also be examples of how somebody might be utilizing finances to keep a person in bondage. Also, verbal abuse. Now, I know this is one of the ones we frequently hear about, the name calling, demeaning statements, the criticism. Oftentimes, we will see people just tear you down. It might embarrass you in front of other people by what they say. They may say it's a joke. Oh, you're being too sensitive. You take everything so personally. But these are all things to attack. There may be conversations where they want you to overhear them talking about you, demeaning you in some way. You could be out publicly. It doesn't matter what location, but the person will just say things that make you feel as if you are unworthy, you don't matter, you're incapable, you're incompetent. And these are also ways to tear people down so that you don't feel like you can leave because you feel powerless, but also you just feel like nobody else will want you, right? So that's part of it. A lot of times, an abusive partner will, or this can be family members as well, who are being abusive to you, may want you to feel as if you're disempowered and that you have lacking abilities. And so this is one of the ways that they will do that is through these verbal statements. Physical abuse is one I most commonly hear when people talk about domestic violence or intimate partner violence. And because we know the pinching, the punching, the kicking, hitting, burning, paddling, slapping, choking, these are all things that could result in bruises or broken bones or lacerations. And that's why oftentimes people will not feel like the other types of abuse are examples of domestic or intimate partner violence because they don't have a bruise one can see. And so that's sometimes the most difficult part in helping people to understand they're in an abusive relationship is because not all bruises are visible, but that doesn't mean they're not there. Emotional abuse, that is the emotional manipulation, the withholding affection, grudges, being dismissive when you bring something to their attention, the threats to leave or threats to spend time with other people if you don't do what they want you to do, threatening to harm themselves if you leave them. That can also be making you question your reality, also known as gaslighting. But any behavior that really just adds to a person feeling insecure or vulnerable or attacks your character, makes you question your character. Those would all be examples of emotional abuse. Sexual abuse, and people will say that they don't think that a partner could sexually abuse them, that, well, my husband or my wife can't rape me, my boyfriend, my girlfriend can't sexually abuse me. But absolutely, anytime you are forced into doing something that makes you feel uncomfortable, that could be filming you without your consent during sexual acts, that could be sharing information about sexual things with other people in an attempt to shame you. It could be pimping you out with the intent of getting drugs or money or trying to control you. We saw this in Spike Lee's movie where we were having a conversation about fraternities and sororities. And so, this is my fraternity brother, you're my girlfriend. And so he's a virgin. I need for you to sleep with him so he won't be a virgin. Then I turn around and tell you I can't be with you anymore because how dare you sleep with somebody else? That was a test, right? So just any types of ways to make you feel bad about yourself, embarrass you, shaming you with sexual acts. It could be very demeaning sexual acts. It could be threatening to cheat on you if you don't have sex in the way that they want you to have sex with them. There could be statements like, well, this is your marital duty, or we're in a relationship. You're obligated to have sex with me any of the ways I want to have sex, whenever I want to have sex. And so it feels very demeaning and a violation, and it's not consensual. Isolation is one of the primary mechanisms for keeping people from leaving because what we want to do is we want to keep people away from information or people or places that may cause them to question what they're experiencing in this relationship. Isolation also means that you don't have any kind of support outside of me. And this is where we can get into some of the trauma bonding because what happens is your abuser ends up being your primary social contact as well. And so in that isolation, there might be embarrassment, shame. You don't want people to see you, particularly if money is being withheld. You can't go get your hair done. You can't get a haircut. You don't have clothes to wear. You don't have transportation, right? And so I'm isolating you, so I'm keeping you away from people because I'm either going to have you so embarrassed or ashamed to be around people, or I'm going to cut you off in terms of you being able to get away from me and go and see other people. And so this is one of the things, one of the reasons also why people sometimes in abusive relationships don't want the other person to have a job. Because again, if you are at work, then that means people are talking to you and there is that potential that you could get some information that will ultimately result in you leaving, which is one of the biggest fears for people, which is why they do some of these other things so that you won't leave them. Stalking, and that could be following you, wanting to see where you are and who you're with. That might be some devices that people can put on your car to track you. That could be popping up on your job. And within the stalking, I think there is that digital component as well. I mentioned the trackers, but also just excessive text and calling, cyberbullying. So I'm putting information out there on social media. I'm talking about you. I'm threatening you. I'm threatening the people that are around you with the stalking, and that could be on their social media accounts, or calling them excessively, or texting them, or showing up to them as well, because I perceive them as a threat. They could be monitoring your internet, seeing what sites you're going to, what you're looking at, which is why some of the domestic violence awareness and prevention sites have a way for you to be able to remove that you were on the site, particularly if you're trying to establish a plan to leave. Revenge porn, which actually isn't porn, but we call it revenge porn because people will share sexual pictures without your consent. And so they'll put them up again to embarrass and shame you, typically have you in very demeaning positions, or them having power over you, and is looking as if you're in their control. Right. Then the spiritual abuse, and I think a lot of people don't know as much about the spiritual abuse. It's not talked as much about. But this is when a person ridicules your religious beliefs. They may say, "Oh, you're giving all your money to the church," or "You must be sleeping with the pastor," or "You being around those people, they're just trying to keep you from me. You don't need to be over there. That's God made me the head of the household. I'm the head of the household," or "God sent you to me. I'm your partner. You listen to me first. It's me, then God." It could be specifically about a particular religious organization or affiliation. It may be trying to keep you away from a particular church, but may you want you to go to one that reinforces some of the things that they're doing. And so that, again, keeps you isolated because you're not around other people to be able to question, like, wait a minute now, what are they teaching you? Where is that at in the Bible? Or how does that fit in terms of your beliefs and your understanding of your spirituality, right? So these are some of the ways that people will do things and you don't really recognize this abuse because they can present it as if they're trying to help you. They're trying to make sure that you are on the path to salvation. They're trying to have you around people that are like-minded, that are safe and secure. It's these other people who are a threat to you, and they're going to send you to damnation because of what you're listening to and seeing and engaging in. Look at how they dress, look at how they talk, look at their high rates of divorce, all of these things, which they may be utilizing biblical principles or other doctrine to be able to keep a person in control. Now, I do want to be clear that domestic violence does also include child abuse, elder abuse, and general neglect, which is why you will see often domestic violence being charged, or family violence, when domestic violence occurs in front of children. So I do want to be clear that some of those go in as well. So that physical, sexual, neglect, verbal, emotional abuse of a child, all of those forms of abuse that are directed at our elderly, or just general neglect, can fall under domestic violence and intimate partner violence, because failing to meet the needs or the psychological needs of a person that may be in your care. It may be a partner or a spouse that may have mental illness. Maybe they have significant physical illness. You're not allowing them to be able to get to appointments. You're withholding their medication from them. They're not getting adequate treatment. They're not being able to engage in activities and do things with other people. So you're withholding that ability for them to get those needs met. It may be that you're putting them literally in physical harm or danger, or stopping them from getting even just medical attention when you do injure or hurt them, because again, don't want anyone to know what's going on. But it also could be just neglect of the other person's basic emotional needs. We know that love and care and supportive and nurturing environments are very important to us in our growth and development. So neglect, it also falls under that category of domestic violence and intimate partner violence. So people frequently ask, like, how, what causes people to be in abusive relationships? And why do people stay in them? Like, we have all this information out there. I don't understand why anybody would be in an abusive relationship. Well, let me just tell you that any of us has the potential to be in an abusive relationship. And that is because there are so many things that put us at risk. We could have a prior history of neglect. mental illness, depression, anxiety, substance abuse, bipolar disorder, pregnancy, particularly if you get pregnant by the person who is abusive to you, or you're pregnant and you're not in a means to be able to take care of yourself, or you have children, and perhaps there was a death or a loss, perhaps there was a breakup, maybe you've been put out of the home of your parents, and so you're looking for that stability because instability is absolutely a risk factor to be in abusive relationship. So that could be instability in terms of your living arrangements, but also your career and your finances. Because as we know, when we are struggling, we're looking for someone to be able to work with us so we can get on our feet. And here comes this partner telling you all of the things that you want to hear, inviting you into their home, letting you know that they'll take care of you. And so here you are in this relationship. And that's also a way that a person gets stuck in a relationship. Because again, if you think about this person controlling the finances, where they have me pretty stuck. It could be loneliness. There may be just general insecurity, not feeling good about yourself, so self-esteem issues, self-worth issues. We recognize that particular attachment styles are more prone to be in abusive relationships. So those of us that have a fear of rejection or being abandoned, um, that are jealous, that have had inconsistency in terms of loving relationships, that haven't been able to develop trust. So these are our avoidant, anxious avoidant attachment styles. The codependent person, right? So that dependent personality style, attachment style as well, is more likely to be right because we're wanting that love. We want to be in a secure, safe space. And so we're looking for someone to create that for us. And what people do who are abusive is that is the picture they paint for you initially so that you trust them and you end up getting in this relationship with you. And then bit by bit, they start removing your independence because lack of independence, of course, is one of those risk factors as well. Why do we stay? We stay because we don't. Who wants to acknowledge that they're in an abusive relationship, that they pick someone that would harm them? I think a lot of times we're trying to get back to who that person used to be. We're chasing how we met and what we felt initially. And so it can be very unsettling to be able to accept that this person is being abusive. We can feel really shameful or guilty about it because we said we wouldn't be in abusive relationships. We all make these statements, right? Growing up throughout our life, oh, here are the things I wouldn't deal with. And then we find ourselves dealing with that. We're not going to acknowledge to anyone we're dealing with it, or perhaps our partner has cut us off from our friends and family. We've been so involved in this relationship. And so now I don't even feel like I can go and talk to people because I feel like I abandoned them. I betrayed them. They may have even talked to me about some concerns about the relationship and I shut that down. So now I don't feel like I have anything else that I can do. My support system has been cut off, right? And that is one of the biggest reasons why people don't leave is because they don't have any place to go and anybody who will accept them in, particularly if they've been in this abusive relationship. There's been conversations. Maybe I attempted to get out of it and I kept going back. And so now I've kind of burned those bridges, if you will, with people. And I just don't feel like I really have any options. There is absolutely this fear of retribution because one of the things we know, particularly about partners who are physically abusive, emotionally abusive, verbally abusive, is they often sexually abusive. They often will retaliate. They will come and find you. They will track you down. They will embarrass you. They will put people that you love in harm's way. And so sometimes there is an absolute fear for your safety and the safety of other people around you that could be threatening to harm your children. And so you don't feel as if you have any recourse but to go and stay in this relationship with them because you want to try to protect these people that you love. I think sometimes we think it's us, right? And so if I do this, if I take care of this, if I cook that food right, if I dress this way, if I lose this amount of weight, if I keep giving them money, if I get more money, if I do all of these things, then they're going to love me. They're going to accept me. I'm going to be enough for them. And so that is a challenge too for a lot of us because we just hold out hope that at some point I will be good enough for you not to treat me this way. We feel obligated too when you're in a relationship with someone, you've been with this person, you feel a connection to them. You don't want to hurt them. You don't want to embarrass them. You don't want to be the reason why they complete suicide. You don't want to be the reason why they're depressed and they don't have any support outside of you. All of these things that they've told you. So you feel obligated to them. You love them. And you want the best for them. And so you feel like you can love them through it. You can love them better. You can fix them. And all of that isn't true, but we've been taught to stay with people, work with people, and this goes to the religious obligations because a lot of times we've been taught, hey, there is not a reason for you to get a divorce, to be separated, to leave your partner. That is a sin. So you stay with them, you work with them in that. Maybe they've got some mental illness or some substance abuse or some other issues. They grew up in a rough, they had a rough childhood, and so you're trying to make excuses for their behavior, like, hey, I understand this is where this is coming from, and so get some help, trying to work with them, thinking that you can again get them to a place where they can make those changes. And so you don't want to leave them because that feels like you're abandoning them. You've been abandoned. You know how that feels. You don't want to put anybody else in that situation. We've talked about, like, if you are financially dependent on this person, you don't have a lot of recourse. It doesn't seem like, because if you leave, you literally will have nothing. And then there is also the fear that a lot of people have when they have children is this person will get custody of my children. I'll lose custody of my children, and then I won't have them. So if I stay in this environment, at least I get to be with my kids. And because of that lack of resources, or because we may have mental health issues, or maybe we even have a criminal background, and so because there's been domestic violence and there's been fighting, and we've had all of this history, and or maybe I've done some things, felony I have in my past, and so I feel trapped. I'm not able to really get any kind of employment that's going to allow me to be able to take care of myself, or even take care of another family, and so I don't feel like again that I have anything else I can do. That limited support network and the financial dependency, the self worth issues definitely top the list, but so do protecting our children. Um, and trying to love this person through whatever they're experiencing. I definitely will say, and fear. Those would be the top ones that I particularly see in therapy. So, how do you know if somebody is experiencing domestic violence, intimate partner violence in their relationships? A lot of times, it is subtle things that you won't necessarily pay attention to at first, but then over time, if you watch, they'll become more visible to you. When you see a person that was outgoing and confident and assertive, and even just in terms of their dress and their attire, um, well put together, and then all of a sudden, they're not confident, they're quiet, they are not going out places with you anymore, their attire is changing. Um, they seem very fearful and on edge. Whenever they get a phone call, their demeanor completely changes. Whenever their partner pops up on the job, their demeanor completely changes. They are constantly asking for permission to do things and letting you know that they can't go. They've stopped even going anywhere at this point. They're not seeing friends, they're not seeing family. You may see them at work, they're keeping to themselves when they used to be more engaging and social. You will see that when you are around them and their partner is very critical. It humiliates them. They may order them around, they may give them a look. Um, I have found that a lot of times people will pinch their partners because we can't see the pinching, right? Like that's something they can do subtly, but you'll just tell a difference in the person's demeanor. Even if they're trying to smile through it, it doesn't feel like a real smile, a legitimate smile. And a lot of times, if you look in people's eyes, you'll see that sadness, you'll see that hurt. You may hear them talk about that their partner is jealous or has a bad temper. You might see that they're frequently scanning with their phone the room to let them know, hey, I'm at work. They call when they get there, I'm at work. I should be home at this time. Um, right, and I just went and took a lunch break. They constantly have their phone around because they don't want to miss a call. They seem very anxious if they miss a call from their partner. Their partner may be calling work and asking where they are. You might see physical injuries on them, particularly bruises. A lot of times we'll try to hide those with long sleeves, clothes and pants. Sometimes we'll put makeup on to try to hide. bruises on our face. They may be out frequently, the broken bones, sprains or cuts, falls. Oh, I fall. Oh, I'm clumsy. Um, Things like that where you'll constantly see them having some kind of medical issues or maybe they're limping. You can just see them physically uncomfortable when they sit down. I know that people will paddle their partners, and so those are things that you wouldn't necessarily be able to see as easily, or they may be burning them, right, and on their back in places that aren't as visible. They can still have on the short sleeves or the tank tops or the shorts because it's on their torso and you wouldn't be able to see it. You may even see it in the children. So the children seem uncomfortable and afraid, withdrawn, maybe they're anxious, looking around. When that partner comes up, they may stiffen up, may see that they're having a incontinence or things going on. They're having problems at school. So there are a lot of different ways if you kind of look at a person and you just notice changes. Those changes, like I said, will just be so out of character for them slowly over time, because often that's what happens in the domestic violence situation is, again, the person is going to present themselves as really wonderful, and they may present themselves as wonderful to you the whole time. You may never see that side of them because, again, they want to protect that image. And so you may not necessarily be able to know by looking at them, but looking at how their partner reacts to them when they're around versus when they're not around. That can be some of the ways that you might recognize. So, what do we do? How do we help? Um, it's important for a person to understand that they're in an abusive relationship, to recognize the cycle of abuse, to understand that there's going to be that conflict that's going to emerge, and it's going to emerge over something very minimal. There is going to be that escalation, and then there's going to be that honeymoon, right? So, oh, you're great and wonderful, and you're loving all of me, and you're buying me things, and you're doing all the stuff I asked you to do, right? Because you don't want me to leave you. But so being able to help people see that when they're in it can be really challenging. So we don't want to judge people's choices. Um, we want to point out behavioral things. We want to give them information, but we do not want to be judgmental. If they decide to stay in that relationship, you continue to do all of the things you do. You pray for them, you expose them to information, you share stuff, you talk to them about being safe, you ask if they have a plan, including their children, if they have any children. You can offer practical help, like being able to watch their children or cook a meal. And sometimes, if they're in an abusive relationship, their partner doesn't want them, especially if their partner recognizes or perceives you to be a threat. They will limit that, but you still offer it. Tell them about domestic violence counseling, give them resources, and you just keep supporting a person. Even if they stay, how long they stay, they leave, they come back, you keep supporting them and encourage them and telling them what they deserve and who they are and their worth and their value, helping them to be more independent, and getting financial resources can be very, very important. Allowing them to understand how they can support themselves if they're not with this person, helping them create safe support systems, being able to ensure that they are addressing their own mental health and wellness because that may be part of it. It's going to get that plug in for therapy. Support groups. So sometimes you plant that seed, and even if that person isn't ready, they may come back at a later point and they will have that information because that tree you planted will be there. But when they do decide to leave, the first things first is the safety plan. And that is really important for people because they have to know how they're going to get out, where they're going to go, what they need to bring, how to make sure they're safe at jobs, at their kids' schools, church, stores, how to take care of pets. A lot of people worry about their pets in addition to their children, how to navigate different scenarios with their partner. And often you'll find that people have to leave when their partner is gone, and they cannot tell their partner they're leaving. And so that's really important for people, particularly if their partner is prone to violence or is controlling, because that's when often a partner will definitely shut down all available resources. There won't be transportation, there won't be money, there won't be anything. Um, they'll try to take the kids and get them away, so they'll do everything they can to cut off a person who is trying to leave, right? Because again, it's about that control and making sure you don't leave me. And so that's why that plan needs to be created ahead of time, and people can know exactly where they're going and what resources they'll have available to them. And it can be very hard to leave with nothing. And that's what ends up happening in a lot of these situations is that partner is getting out of that situation and they're leaving a lot behind. And so starting over can be very overwhelming. What do I say? The devil we know is better than the devil we don't know. A lot of times it's just like, hey, the idea of starting over and having to rebuild, my credit has been all jacked up by this person. Where am I going to live? And take my kids to a shelter? What is that? We're going from living in this wonderful environment to being crammed in a small space with all of us and looking for other people to support us. That can be embarrassing and shameful as well for people. So just being able to understand that that's a temporary process and getting people on their feet and recognizing like, hey, it's going to be a little different for you for a while, but you'll be free. Making sure when they are talking about like, I'm uncertain, I don't know, that you remind them, hey, this is why you left, right? Because sometimes our memories will get a little short, and we'll forget. We'll think about the good times and what we had, and we'll forget all of the things that this person did to us to make us feel like we felt, or the physical bruises, or even worse for some people, in terms of what has been broken or damaged that they won't get back. So just keeping that in mind. But also it's important for us to just prioritize ourselves. And so reminding people that it is not selfish for you to love yourself enough to leave someone who doesn't know how to love you. And that is not abandoning them. Sometimes when you love people, you have to set them free. Because if being with you is what they say, being with you causes them to be like that, we don't need to be together. That means we bring out the worst in each other. So let us separate. I do think it's important for all of us to be able to trust our gut when we think something may be going on, and trust our gut when we think this relationship may not be a healthy one for me. And as we're doing that, we need to think about, okay, what allowed me to get in this relationship? Because what we'll do is we'll end up getting in something else, and that's what happens sometimes. Is we'll leave a relationship, getting into a relationship with someone else because we're dependent and we're lonely and we're scared and we don't have self-worth and all of these things. So somebody else comes to rescue us, and that person that's rescuing us is more of the same. And so just making sure that we're understanding the dynamics that led to the abusive relationship. And now sometimes it's important to take some relationship sobriety, take that time away from a relationship, work on yourself, focus on yourself when you've left an abusive relationship, because you being vulnerable puts you at risk for another abusive relationship. So there's always resources for you. Here in Columbus, we have Hope Harbour, but there's a National Domestic Violence Hotline, domesticshelters.org, loveisrespect.org. And all of these resources have phone numbers, crisis lines. You can text. You can get resources about how to leave, get that safety plan in place, walk through it, and not have to do this work by yourself. You are enough. You deserve to be in a loving, safe relationship. And there is healing on the other side of an abusive relationship. You do not have to leave by yourself. There is hope and there is help. Be well.